Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. As 3 Canadian MPs made their way to Israel to show their support for the Jewish state, our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will give us an update on the war in Gaza. As Ottawa's federal fall economic update is about to be released, federal Tory leader Pierre Poilievre says record numbers of Canadians are going to food banks. And the Alberta government announced more than $3 million will go to help support seniors escape elder abuse.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. 3 Conservative and 2 Liberal MPs are in Israel to show solidarity as the country grieves following the October 7th attack by Hamas, which left around 1,400 people dead and around 240 hostages taken. Liberal MP Anthony Housefather says he and the others met with survivors of the Hamas attack and now understands why Israelis will never, ever let this happen again. No Canadians were on the list of foreign nationals being allowed to leave Gaza and cross into Egypt earlier on Monday. The Palestinian Health Authority says more than 30 babies born prematurely have been safely evacuated from the war-torn region and moved to the southern portion of Gaza.
العدد الأولي كان 39 طفل خداج. فقدنا منهم للأسف لأنهم في ظروف غير صحية، فقدنا منهم 8 وبقي 31 تم إخلاؤهم اليوم هذه اللحظة إلى مستشفى تل السلطان برفح. سيتم إخلائهم إلى جمهورية مصر العربية صباح الغد.
You know, the numbers we receive as to the death toll in Gaza come straight from the Palestinian Health Authority, which is run by Hamas. They say more than 12,000 people have been killed, along with 4,500 children in the region, since Israel began retaliating for the October 7th attack by Hamas. Now, Hamas, as we know, is a terrorist organization. Can we actually believe anything they say or post to social media? I posed that question to our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari.
First of all, there's no way to come up with an exact death toll this quickly. And then when they were pressed on it, they came out with all of these kind of ID numbers. Again, impossible. Israel is still trying to work through its 1,400 or more casualties and really identify everyone. So it is impossible to believe that they would be able to come up with that number.
Lisa Daftari will have the latest from Gaza, including if we'll see a ceasefire anytime soon or if any more of the hostages will be released. Watch for that interview coming up in the second half of our broadcast. Meanwhile, the situation in the West Bank continues to worsen as the area is rocked by deadly attacks by settlers against Palestinians. Many in the region have been forced to leave their homes.
ممنوع نوصل بالبيت هذا كل ما يروح هناك بصير يطخوا عليه. كل الإعلام متسلط على غزة. المستوطنين ركزوا على الضفة لحتى ينتقموا منهم لأنه فيش تركيز على الضفة.
Canada's defense minister told a global security conference in Halifax that the support from Ukraine's allies in their war with Russia is not waning. Bill Blair says this is especially true even as much of the world's attention is now shifted to the war taking place in the Middle East.
I have seen absolutely unwavering and unequivocal support for the support of Ukraine among those allies, and I believe that that remains strong. I think there is a very strong recognition among all of our partners in that room at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group that we are supporting Ukraine with munitions and with money. But they are fighting this battle with their blood. And in many respects, they are fighting on all of our behalf against that very terrible challenge to the international rules-based order, to the sovereignty of nations. And they're on the front line, and we believe absolutely unequivocally, and I think our allies do as well, that support is essential, and we have to continue to support them for as long as it takes with whatever is required.
The Ottawa trial resumed today of Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Leach and Chris Barber. The court heard from Ottawa Police Constable Nicole Bach. She was Barber's primary police contact during the 3-week demonstration that gridlocked our nation's capital early last year. She was due to face cross-examination after testifying Barber told her things were getting out of control in the early days of the protest, and that protesters would only leave if the Prime Minister recognized them and lifted all pandemic-related mandates. A senior government official says the fall federal economic statement being released on Tuesday will make life much better for Canadians. It'll make billions of dollars in loans available for home builders and earmark a fund for affordable housing. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is set to announce $15 billion in low-cost loans and around $1 billion toward affordable housing, which will support social housing groups and nonprofits. She's also expected to detail support for local governments cracking down on short-term rentals and lay out a new Canadian mortgage charter. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre spoke to reporters about the upcoming fall economic statement. Poilievre says after 8 years of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a record 2 million Canadians are now going to food banks.
People showing up at the Mississauga Food Bank asking for help with medical assistance and dying not because they're sick, but because after 8 years of Trudeau, life is so miserable and impoverished that they would rather die than live in a tent. Speaking of tents, we now have these encampments, homeless encampments in every centre in the country. Halifax, the home province of Trudeau's housing minister, has 30 homeless encampments. 30 in one city. This would have been unimaginable before Justin Trudeau and his disastrous inflationary policies. After 8 years of Trudeau, work doesn't pay. You make it, he takes it. After 8 years of Trudeau promising affordable housing and spending billions of dollars on the bureaucracy to support that, we have a doubling of housing costs.
NDP MPs are calling on the federal government to do more to protect trans children and adults in the trans community. BC MP Randall Garrison says there have been 321 trans and gender-diverse people who've been murdered around the world over the past year, including at least one Canadian. Garrison says the amount of hate against the trans community continues to climb.
We know that the most vulnerable in our society, some of the most vulnerable, are trans kids. And we've seen Conservative premiers attacking children's rights, in particular trans kids' rights. And we all need to speak out strongly against that. As well as standing directly against the hate, 7 years ago, we passed Bill C-216, which put transgender and gender-diverse rights into the Canadian Human Rights Code and into the hate crime section of the Criminal Code. But what we haven't done as a society is make those rights a reality. And so we put forward a white paper in June that has 29 recommendations, about how to make those rights a reality. And if we implement those rights, we will strengthen the trans community to stand in the face of this rising tide of hate and violence.
November 20th, meanwhile, is proclaimed as Transgender Day of Remembrance. It was started back in 1999 to honor the memory of Rita Hester, a transgender woman who was killed in 1998. The University of Lethbridge is holding its own event until 7 o'clock tonight in the Markin Hall atrium.
After she had been murdered, one of her colleagues had started this event just to promote and bring awareness to her situation. Has since been done yearly just to remember those who have been victims of anti-trans violence.
It's kind of now more than ever that we need to be acknowledging and respecting like trans and gender nonconforming individuals and making sure that they have safe spaces. A lot of the people who have been lost this past year is due to violence or suicide. So a lot of issues there systemically.
The event tonight includes a vigil with homemade paper candles, speakers, personal stories, and reflection. The Alberta government says close to 10% of our seniors suffer from elder abuse. That is 10% too much. Now, to keep our seniors safer, the province is investing an extra $3.3 million over the next few years to provide more safe spaces for seniors seeking help, especially in our rural communities. Seniors Minister Jason Nixon explains where the money will be going.
This funding will provide $2.2 million to establish a new Safe Spaces program for seniors experiencing elder abuse in rural Alberta and Indigenous communities to ensure there are safe, accessible places for them to go in communities in rural Alberta and Indigenous communities. The Safe Spaces program will utilize vacant lodge spaces to expand shelter capacity for seniors fleeing abuse. In partnership with the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council, grant funding will be available to eligible rural and Indigenous communities with a call for proposals beginning in January 2024. The additional $1.1 million of this new funding will also go to Sage Seniors Safe House, where we are today, to expand the number of spaces they provide to seniors fleeing abuse here in Edmonton and the surrounding area.
Nixon says the new funding is on top of the $7.4 million the province has already allocated to prevent elder abuse here in Alberta. The first contract to begin twinning Highway 3 was awarded by the province. The contract for the project was given to Ledcor Highways Limited. Officials say the close to $180 million in funding will twin 46 kilometres between Taber and the hamlet of Burdett. The province says pre-construction work is underway and should be completed by the end of the year. The project, which is expected to create around 755 jobs, is expected to begin next spring and should be completed sometime in 2025. Officials say there are 8 phases of twinning Highway 3, and once Phase 1 is complete, the next phase will be twinning 10 kilometres of the highway by the Coleman Bypass. Well, you know, nothing says the Christmas holiday season has officially begun like a good old-fashioned tree lighting. On Monday, Lethbridge City Hall got a little bit brighter with the official tree lighting, which took place.
On the count of 3, we're going to light this beautiful Christmas tree with this fancy magic remote. In 3, 2, 1. Woohoo! There it is. And may I say, happy holidays, everyone. Fantastic job.
Yes, it certainly was. According to Deputy Mayor Mark Campbell, it was city staff who volunteered to come in over the weekend to put up the tree and decorate the foyer. Campbell also took the opportunity to remind us to remember those less fortunate during this holiday season.
We know our food banks need our support. Many other great charities and organizations will also be in need this season, so please take a look for information and help if you can so we can ensure everyone has a safe and happy holiday season. We have the bins behind us here for the Christmas Hope campaign, which we hope you will all consider. But I'd also like to encourage people to think and shop local and support our array of amazing local businesses right across the city.
Yeah, the Christmas tree will remain up now throughout the new year. You may remember the story we brought you last year about 3 escaped ostriches from the town of Taber. That story garnered so much attention, and now the town has garnered 3 international awards as a result. Now, to discuss this in more detail is Megan Brennan, Communications and Projects Coordinator for the town of Taber. She joins us now via Zoom. Megan, first of all, refresh our memories a little bit. Give us a little bit of backstory here about the 3 escaped ostriches.
In all honesty, I thought it was a joke, so I didn't find out about it until that afternoon. Our CAO came to my office and said, "Have you heard about the Taber ostriches?" And I legitimately thought he was joking until I saw the news, and nope, it wasn't a joke. So ostriches escaped from a local farmer's field and got out and caused a few feathers to get ruffled around here, pun fully intended. And so we just knew as the government that thousands of eyes were going to be on us and that it required some sort of response. So that night, I'll be very, very honest with you and say we had a boilerplate kind of regular government response. Glad that everything worked out. Nobody was hurt. I mean, 1 ostrich was killed, but it could have been a lot more dangerous than it turned out to be, which was great. So we thought, okay, that'll be good enough. And the more and more I thought about it that night, such an absurd situation required sort of a more tongue-in-cheek response, if you will. And so that was how our response was ultimately born.
So, Megan, which international awards did the town of Taber win?
Yeah, so all 3 are administered by the Association of Communications and Marketing Professionals. The MarCom is dedicated solely to communicating and marketing. As per its name, Hermes is more creative and what they call the revolutionaries of the information revolution, if you will. So creative ways of getting the message out, design-wise and communication-wise. The Communitas, is incredibly special. It focuses specifically on organizations that want to do good in their community and better their business practices to provide some sort of benefit to society and community service. So that's what we won for, and it's an incredible honor to receive them.
Well, congratulations again, Megan, and thanks so much for your time today. That was Megan Brennan, Communications and Projects Coordinator for the town of Taber. More is finally being done to protect the Blackfoot language and culture. Now, that's according to Arnold Fox, who's the Director of Social Development for the Blood Tribe here in southern Alberta. Fox says it is sad, however, that many First Nations are losing their languages.
The major part of our task is to help preserve the Blackfoot language and to help the language itself move along and adapt to current terms that are used today in our everyday language. So that's why it's a dual function. We realize that a lot of First Nations across the country are losing the language. I believe there's some dire predictions that within 25 years, we will just have 3 First Nation languages still functional in Canada.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Arnold Fox from the Blood Tribe and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our broadcast. Well, it was a game for the ages. The 110th Grey Cup Sunday in Hamilton did not disappoint. The Montreal Alouettes came back to beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 28-24 with a game-winning touchdown in the last 20 seconds of the contest. For the underdog Als, it was their 8th straight victory. The Grey Cup MVP was former Riders and current Alouettes quarterback Cody Fajardo.
Honestly, it doesn't feel real. To tell you the truth, it's one of those feelings that feels like a movie. And all the hard work, all the blood, the sweat, the tears, all the, the hatred I got, it's all worth it now saying I'm a Grey Cup champ as a starting quarterback. A lot of guys, you didn't know the name before the season started, but now you're going to remember their name, and our names will be on that cup, and we'll be immortal forever.
We just knew if we kept working and we stuck together and we believed that we can win every game, then that's going to happen, and we just got to keep working and battle through any adversity. Just a rush of happiness, and I was just so glad I could make a play for my team, my coaches, and my family.
But it was such a heartbreak for Bombers fans. It was an amazing game, though, I got to tell you. And it was an amazing day here in Lethbridge. Gorgeous fall weather, and things will be warming up even further. Full weather details are on deck. You know, it's a beautiful day for a walk in Nicholas Sharon Park and maybe a run through the coulees here in Lethbridge. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near 3 degrees. Tuesday, increasing clouds, but the mercury should climb to a balmy 14. A low pressure system rolls in on Wednesday, bringing clouds and showers, and the temperature dropping down to 3. Thursday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of only 0. Friday, mainly cloudy with a high near 4. Not a bad weekend is shaping up so far either. It should also be 4 degrees on both Saturday and Sunday under a partly cloudy sky. Now, the average high for this time of year is 3 degrees with an average low of -8. The record high was 17 set way back in 2005, and the record low was a very chilly -32 in 1996. The sun rose at 7:51 and set at 4:43. Let's see how the rest of the country is shaping up for Tuesday now. Expect periods of rain and 11 degrees for Victoria, rain as well, and 10 degrees for Vancouver. It should be mainly cloudy and 9 degrees in Edmonton, a mixture of sun and cloud, and 12 degrees for Calgary. There should be lots of sunshine, and 4 degrees is on tap for Regina on Tuesday. Just a few clouds and 5 for Saskatoon. Sunshine and +1 for Winnipeg. Now in the central part of the country, expect rain mixed with snow and a high of 5 degrees in Toronto, snow and -1 for Ottawa, partly cloudy and +1 for Montreal. Over in Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly sunny, and the freezing mark is 0 for Fredericton. Sun mixed with cloud and 3 degrees in Halifax. Mostly cloudy and 2 in Charlottetown. And in St. John's, it should be overcast and 3 degrees on Tuesday. The Canada Revenue Agency says it has denied or adjusted more than $450 million in funds dispersed to employers through a pandemic wage subsidy program. The report released on Monday says the majority of employers who received the subsidy were compliant. It also says that most adjustments to claims were related to calculation errors or lack of documentation rather than ineligibility. A report by the Auditor General last year warned that thousands of businesses that received wage subsidies during the pandemic may not have been eligible. A court ruling in the United States says realtors colluded to receive higher commission rates could change the way agents operate here in Canada. Earlier this month, a Missouri jury found that the National Association of Realtors and others were guilty of inflating real estate agent commissions. A class action lawsuit examining similar practices was also launched here in Canada. Jeff Reimer is a realtor with Royal LePage here in Lethbridge. He says, you really don't see that kind of collusion here.
Commission rates aren't set, so they are fully negotiable here already. So when you put your house on the MLS, you choose to offer a commission to offer to a cooperating broker that will bring the buyer. There's no set rules. In fact, we have quite a diverse set of commissions on the MLS system, ranging anywhere from, nice percentages of, 2 or 3%, depending on the price point of the home, all the way down to $1. So if people want to put their, a commission that's offered to any of the other agents, they can pick that and they can negotiate that with their person that they list it with. So it's really open and fully competitive, in my opinion. And Alberta has rules in place to protect against collusion and price fixing.
Sotheby's auction is predicting that 6 shirts worn by Lionel Messi during Argentina's winning run at last year's World Cup in Qatar could sell for more than $10 million US. That would make them the most valuable collection of sports memorabilia ever sold. The current record for a game-worn item was Diego Maradona's jersey, worn in Argentina's infamous 1986 2-1 quarterfinal win over England. It sold for $9.3 million US at Sotheby's in London last year. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 70 points on the day to finish at 20,246. The Dow was up 203 points to 35,151. The S&P 500 was up 33 on the day to 4547, and the Nasdaq was up 159 points to 14,284. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.71 to $77.60 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to $2.89 US. Gold was down $3.09 on the day to $1977.73 US an ounce, and silver was down 28 cents to $23.44 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9 per bushel, barley's at $6.95, canola's at $15.64, and corn is at $8.35 per bushel. Live cattle December contract was down 28 cents to $175.48. Feeder cattle were down 74 cents to $228.64. And lean hogs December contract was down 63 cents to $70.35. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $72.86 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government says close to 10% of our seniors suffer from elder abuse. To help keep our seniors safer, the province is investing an extra $3.3 million over the next 3 years to provide more safe spaces for seniors seeking help, especially in our rural areas. Seniors Minister Jason Nixon says the new funding is on top of the $7.4 million the province has already allocated to prevent elder abuse across Alberta. Will the hostages being held by Hamas be released anytime soon? Will we actually see a ceasefire in the region between Israel and Hamas? Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will give us her thoughts shortly and have an update on the war in the Middle East in just a moment. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Henderson Lake Park Run invites all to throw on a pair of runners and participate in a free weekly computer-timed and recorded 5-kilometer walk, jog, or run. The park run is one of 2,100 park runs held around the world. Dogs on leashes and kids in strollers are welcome too. The park run begins at the Kinsman Picnic Shelter at 9 a.m. every Saturday. To register, visit parkrun.ca. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There are some reports coming out of the Middle East that we could see a temporary ceasefire and the potential for hostages to be released by the terrorist group Hamas. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Lisa Daftari, our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, what has to take place in order for, number one, a ceasefire to take place?
Well, you'd think that most people around the world would agree that the hostages should be released. We actually had a woman this week give birth as a hostage. She was 9 months pregnant when she was taken hostage over a month ago on October 7th by Hamas terrorist group. And it's crazy that the world, many people around the world, are calling for a ceasefire before they demand that the 240 hostages be released by Hamas. And it's crazy that they are talking about, all the different consequences of war, the collateral damage, the damage inside Gaza, the death toll, without, again, talking about the first condition being that those innocent hostages, the civilians, are released.
Now, Hamas still, like you said, has more than 240 hostages that they kidnapped from October 7th. What would they potentially want in return? That Israel doesn't maybe wipe them off the face of the earth?
Well, I think it's the other way around. What they would want is probably their terrorists, thousands of terrorists. I think the number is about 6,000 or 7,000 Hamas terrorists that are being held in prison. They want them to be released. Now, the reason why this would be a very bad idea is because some of the operatives in this attack were released in a different prisoner exchange for one Israeli. They gave back many terrorists, Hamas operatives, who again were involved in this attack. They have to eradicate Hamas. They have to eradicate these terrorists. They have to eradicate these operatives. It is what's best for the entire world. This is a terror organization that is on the U.S. terror watch list, on the terror list rather. And again, we're looking at the collateral damage, and I think a lot of people around the world and the mainstream media mostly is fixated on that. That's where you're seeing the footage. A lot of it's actually fake footage, but a lot of it's real footage. Obviously, there is a lot of death and destruction, but not looking at the origin of all of this. An attack that followed many other attacks, by the way, Hal. What people don't understand is if there is a ceasefire and Hamas continues to exist and these terrorists continue to operate, there will be more attacks on Israel. There will be more attacks around the world that are funded and trained by Iran's regime. So this is not something that anyone can take lightly. And again, starting off with the hostages being released. Secondly, there being some sort of an understanding that, this is not something that can happen again. These are innocent civilians. I mean, after 9/11, there wasn't this, divide in the world or in the mainstream media of whether or not the United States should retaliate or whether or not the United States should see this as something that they deserved or they had coming. So, it's crazy how far we've come. It's crazy how social media has had a role in really brainwashing an entire generation to appreciate Osama bin Laden, which is what we saw this week on TikTok. Failure of an entire generation of parents to teach their kids right and wrong, to teach them love for country, whether it's Canada or the United States or European nations. We're seeing a lot of, whether it's immigrant families or others, hating where they live. I saw this really funny tweet. It's not funny. I think it's because it's just so accurate. It says it's very easy to burn an American flag, but if you really mean it, burn your American green cards, meaning, leave before you start burning the American flag on the streets of America.
Lisa, we've talked extensively about Iran's connection to Hamas and Hezbollah, but a former official for Iran's Revolutionary Guard has been giving out some mixed messages lately. First, he says Iran will kill Western hostages he claimed his nation is holding. Then he backtracked and said, no, the targets are actually Israeli and U.S. military bases in the region. Well, which is it?
Yeah, there's no confusion here. There are two enemies that have been the sworn enemies of Iran's regime from the day they came into power after toppling the Shah of Iran in 1979. It was the Islamic Revolution, which really changed the course of not just the Middle East, but the entire world by having an actual government of Iran, not the people, which we know the people are very much against it, but a government of Iran that supports global terror. It exports terror. And since then, they put money into Hezbollah and now the Houthis and, of course, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the one-offs. They're everywhere. Insurgencies inside Syria and Iraq. But they've always said there's the big Satan, which is referring to the United States, and the little Satan, which is referring to Israel. So they are against Americans, they are against Israelis, and this has always been their go-to. This is the narrative they go to when they want to get people to rally around the flag. They did it in the early 80s after coming into power by getting involved in the Iran-Iraq war. They fooled parents into sending their children into war by making them shaheed, into martyrs. And now they're doing the same thing. They're trying to get people to rally around the flag, but guess what, Hal? It's not working. For over a year, we saw the Iranian people coming out onto the street streets in the Masa Amini protests. And if you recall Masa Amini, the 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian girl who was brutally beaten and then passed away from her for her injuries, just for showing a little bit of hair, not wearing her hijab in the proper Islamic manner. And again, thousands and thousands of Iranians coming onto the streets to say, we want regime change, not just in Iran, but around the world. We saw Iranian Canadians, Iranian Americans coming out onto the streets and protesting. And this is no different. This is exactly what we're watching. We're watching the tentacles of Iran's regime reach Israeli civilians. Hamas, the attack that we saw, it was documented by the Wall Street Journal in two different exposés, one showing the meetings that were held between these different terror groups and Iran's regime in Lebanon, and the second one showing that they actually trained these terrorists to go in and carry out a much more sophisticated attack than we've ever seen by Hamas against Israel and Israeli civilians.
You know, Lisa, we're also seeing images of tunnels underneath a hospital in Gaza City. Is this where the Hamas command center was set up, proving once again that Hamas was using their own people as human shields?
Right, and let's see which mainstream media outlets will go back and correct the narrative. Hal, thank you for reporting on this and for clarifying this. This hospital was just used for this. I mean, it was a cover-up, right? It was in a Hamas headquarters underneath. The Israeli hostages were actually taken there as well. So when the media comes in and tries to show people and make people really antagonize Israel for going and shooting or attacking a hospital because of the civilians, because of the babies, because of the patients that are held there, why isn't Hamas held to account for protecting its civilians? The Palestinian people are governed by Hamas that is using them as a cover-up to hide behind them so that they should get killed. And that's why we're seeing the death toll rise. But because this is collateral damage, they're being used as human shields and they're not being protected by their own, which is Hamas, a terror organization. And this hospital has been a very big topic. I think a lot of people that I know have sent me that and saying, Lisa, is this true? This is a hospital. Why is Israel doing this? And here we have it. It's actually the Hamas headquarters. And it's been found out that these tunnels are used for terrorism. Every single resource that Hamas has used for terrorism and not for improving the lives of the Palestinian people.
And there was even a British doctor who worked at Shifa confirms that the Gaza hospital in question was used for many non-medical purposes, saying if I went there, I would have been killed, shot dead. So there's different areas of the hospital.
And Hal, I have to add, in 2005, Amnesty International reported that the Palestinian people are being basically victimized by their own because their hospitals are being used as terror hubs. So this is something that has been ongoing. It's been known by the international community that did nothing about it. Talk about the UN that gives all this money to UNRWA and to the Palestinian people without any conditions, without any preconditions, to go in and see what is happening to the Palestinian people and how their government is using them and killing them and not giving them a quality of life or access to medical care or access to proper schools where they're not being indoctrinated. These are the questions that we have to ask the international community that actually knew about these hospitals and didn't do anything about it beforehand.
And you know, we keep hearing numbers from the Palestinian Health Authority that since Israel began attacking Hamas in the Gaza Strip, that more than 12,000 people have died and around 4,500 children. But Lisa, the health authority is run by Hamas. Obviously, people have died since the fighting has escalated in the region. But how can we trust these numbers?
Right. This is the Gaza Health Ministry, which is absolutely, Hamas equals Hamas, right? We even heard President Biden at a press conference at the White House. He was asked by a reporter, what are you going to do about these numbers? He said, I'm not going to trust them. Point blank, he said that. And I think that is, reassuring, at least coming from the Biden White House, which has been kind of flip-flopping on its support of Israel. But in this case, first of all, there's no way to come up with an exact death toll this quickly. And then when they were pressed on it, they came out with all of these kind of ID numbers. Again, impossible. Israel is still trying to work through its 1,400 or more casualties and really identify everyone. So it is impossible to believe that they would be able to come up with that number. Look, there is a death toll, obviously. There, again, collateral damage, they're used as human shields. They are asked by Israel, which Israel has no obligation to get them out of harm's way because this is an actual war. But Israel does asked them to leave beforehand. Hamas tells them to stay. They have actually stopped Palestinian civilians, some of them who have been American citizens or dual citizens, to stop and not move out of the way. They want that number to rise. Now, whether that number is 12,000 or 11,000 or 10,000, we probably believe it's less than that, but there is, again, a death toll. And for them to come out with these numbers every day, they tack on another 1,000. The Palestinian, I should say Hamas, has used the Palestinian people, to basically increase that death toll. We have seen Palestinian actors that appear in every single social media shot or in front of the New York Times, where they use, ketchup or paint as blood. And they're actually trying to win the PR war in very dishonest means. This is something, again, we're dealing with a terror organization. Nothing they say should be trusted.
Lisa, some military experts are now saying that since Hamas cannot beat Israel militarily, they're trying to beat them through, like you said, the mainstream media and through academia. Can you explain? Let's talk about some of the influence in the colleges and universities across North America.
Right. Great point, Hal. There are two wars being fought here. One is between Hamas and Israel in the Middle East. The other one is all around the world. And I would say that Israel is actually losing that war. When you go onto social media, particularly TikTok, Instagram, poison, a lot of lies, no facts, and all very, very, very incendiary anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic sentiments. Again, baseless. These are tropes. These are slogans. And the arguments between the two sides are, in presenting the facts, and then you see again more calls for genocide. It's pretty horrific how far this has come. Again, you're seeing it at the university level. You're seeing it in academia. We had here in Los Angeles actual notes sent out by the teachers union for first and second grade teachers to teach their students that Israel is committing genocide. It's just horrific. A lot of narrative shifting, and again, members of Congress here in the United States, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, we're seeing them promote a lot of this propaganda. The initial hospital that was hit, that was a lie. The mainstream media, many of them came out and corrected it. Rashida Tlaib has still not come out and corrected that. And so this is, again, a push to change the narrative, but all means possible. A lot of protests. We saw protests this weekend in Wisconsin with Nazi flags. We saw protests here in Los Angeles calling, again, from the river to the sea. That's a genocidal call to take Israel off the map. And no consequences, Hal. I think that's what it's really going to come down to. Will there be consequences on college campuses, protests? I mean, how far are we going to allow free speech to go when it's actually calling for the eradication of an entire race of people? I mean, and would this stand if it were about any other group of minorities? Jews make up 2% of the United States population, and I know much smaller populations all around the world, 15 million total, and yet they have no protection when it comes to calls for the eradication of the Jewish people. So again, two wars being fueled by very, very bad actors, whether it's Hamas or the far left. It's happening. And it's something that we have to think about when this war is over. That second war, the narrative war, that anti-Semitism war will still be here. And that's something that we really have to talk about in terms of rooting it out from our own cities and communities.
Now, still with wars, let's talk about what's going on in Ukraine, Lisa. This February, it'll be 2 years since Russia invaded. Any talk of a potential ceasefire there or the war finally coming to an end?
No, we're actually seeing some escalations, the use of drones, the use of this moving deeper into Ukraine. And in the United States, if there's any reason to believe that this war would be over soon, that would be disrupted by the fact that President Biden wanted to couple, or still wants to couple together, a bill for funding to Israel to be coupled with more funding to Ukraine. Wow. In the words of Judge Janine, who's on Fox News, she said something along the lines of, let's not use, Israeli children as a guise to get more funding to Ukraine. And I think a lot of people feel that way, that enough is enough, and this is not going anywhere anytime soon. So there has to be another route to actually discuss how this could end in a way that would prevent more casualties, prevent more, just 2 years of this. It's Ukraine is war torn, many migrants moving out of that area, and so many lives uprooted for a very senseless war. So we hope that the powers that be come to their senses to end this before we get to that 2-year mark.
Even in our city, we've taken a lot of Ukrainian refugees and happy to do so. She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Did you know that, as with most languages, the words for certain modern-day items didn't always exist? And this, of course, is especially true of Indigenous languages like the Blackfoot language. In fact, it's quite interesting how some of the Blackfoot elders have come up with words or phrases for modern items like computers, cell phones, and texting. I'm so pleased to have Arnold Fox joining me today. Arnold is the director of the Blood Tribe Social Development, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about Blackfoot language and interpretation. Welcome to the show, Arnold. Great to have you on today.
Happy to be here, Jeanette.
Okay, so why don't you maybe start off by telling me a bit about what you do, what your work kind of looks like over there at Blood Tribe Social Development?
Okay. Well, in relation to the Blackfoot Signage Project and in relation to the Blackfoot language, our department stepped forward to host what we eventually called 8 Weeks Language Committee. So 8 Weeks means Blackfoot speaking. That's what that phrase, that word means, 8 Weeks. So we're the speaking language group. And the task that was given to us, it was instituted a little over 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. The major part of our task is to help preserve the Blackfoot language and to help the language itself move along and adapt to current terms that are used today in our everyday language. So that's why it's a dual function. We realize that a lot of First Nations across the country are losing the language. I believe there's some dire predictions that within 25 years, we will just have 3 First Nation languages still functional in Canada.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's quite astounding once you think about it. And I grew up with the Blackfoot was the first language, and I can't really envision not being able to use that or not giving it to our children and our grandchildren to be able to carry forth. So that was the gist of our task in that committee. The committee itself has 10 to 12 elders who come together once a month, and we offer an annual symposium. Blackfoot Language and Symposium in Lethbridge is the most convenient location. There are some representations from other Blackfoot nations in the area, Blackfeet in Montana, the Pinchot Nation near Pincher Creek, and Siksika near east of Calgary. So those are the Blackfoot-speaking nations in North America.
Fascinating,
Yeah. So out of that, I would say I'm being optimistic by saying 20% of us still use that language on an everyday basis. So it definitely is in fear of dying at a certain point or not being utilized anymore. So that's what we're hoping to avoid. We're realizing now with the programs that we offer, even in social services, we offer short-term employment training for our clients. And we have fully realized over the years that one of the modules they take is the Blackfoot culture and the Blackfoot language. I used to take for granted that our younger people had this opportunity to learn at home and all of that, but that's not the case. In my generation, we were lucky that there was a very limited amount of influence from media. So the everyday language we heard all the time was Blackfoot, whereas our younger people are inundated with TV, just to start there, radio. I often tell my audiences that when I was growing up in the 50s, 1950s, we had a radio, an old radio that sat on top of a cabinet, and there was a big dry cell battery. So whenever the battery went dead, there went our connection with the outside world.
Sure.
We were particularly insular in those days, so we didn't have all those influences.
Yeah.
Just as for one of my nephews, we made a concerted effort to have him speak Blackfoot from the time he started uttering words. And he was doing really good. Okay? We noticed that the words he was uttering up to 2 years of age were Blackfoot. But that's because in the home we had decided, no, he's going to speak Blackfoot. He discovered TV around that age, and what's that? Anyways, he discovered it and was very drawn.
Probably
to
Nickelodeon or, you know, the kids shows, right?
Sesame Street, you know, but they're all in English, eh?
Yeah.
So we realize the influence that our young people have to live with is nothing like what I went through growing up. Mm-hmm. It was comfortable for me to carry on the Blackfoot language, but it's not that for kids anymore.
No, that's so interesting, and it's so true, and it's something we don't really think about. You were mentioning that they're predicting there could only be 3 Indigenous languages left. How many are there? I mean, there must be hundreds, right?
Well, yeah, if you stop to think, there are 500 plus different First Nations in Canada. To get an idea, of course, there's regional, you know, like the Woodland Cree have a big area in most of the provinces. So that language I know will survive because there's a lot of speakers over an extended geographical area. But once you start, like I said, becoming too insular, you don't have that opportunity. And in our population too.
Definitely. So interesting. Now, Arnold, as the director of the Blood Tribe Social Services, I know that you are also involved in a Blackfoot signage project. And just for some background for our viewers, several organizations in southwestern Alberta, I guess, have partnered up with Kainai Nation to fund the construction of Blackfoot language signs across the region. So I guess this is to both enrich the landscape and invite locals and visitors to learn more about the deep history of the region. And I would say have the opportunity to see the translations of certain community names in the Blackfoot language sort of come to life. I find that really interesting. So Arnold, as the director of Blood Tribe Social Services, you're a part of this signage project, which will see these beautiful signs come to life with this language. So tell me more about this project and sort of how it came to be.
Okay, I would like to think that really the idea was planted as part of the TNR, the Truth and Reconciliation. All of the recommendations, I think there was 108 recommendations that came from that. And I've been noticing in southern Alberta, in my world, I travel a lot to Lethbridge. We're not confined. We shop in Fort McLeod, Cardston. So we have a lot of daily interaction with these communities. And the Blackfoot names that were assigned to these communities go way back. Now, there's some newer communities that we're going to have to sit with the elders to develop the name. So South Rose, the name of the organization that invited me to join. And so I did. And I didn't really know at first what the extent of the program was. But in our first couple of meetings, I've grown to appreciate that this is a really worthwhile effort for southern Alberta. I don't think there's enough we can do to further the relations between the population here, the Blackfoot or Blood population on Kainai, and the surrounding communities. There's been some excellent relationships that have developed over the years. I can two at this point that are kind of related to what we're doing. It just emphasizes more communication, positive in a positive light. So that's what we're doing with these. Now we're going to open it up. It's open to towns and counties. know how when you enter a county, you see a little
Yeah,
sign.
like welcome to Tabor or Cardston or yeah.
So those are the two kind of that are foremost. Certainly welcome to look at other, but for those two, for the towns and the counties, we're definitely looking and hoping to get applications from them to this on this signage. I'm thinking it's another opportunity for us to interact with the wider population. And there's another initiative that's looking at racism and working with the mayors of the surrounding towns and trying to establish a common footing to address the racism. Now, there was another project I was thinking of, but those give you an idea that there's more activity, there's more interaction between the Black community and the surrounding. We've utilized the towns, like I said, for shopping. 50% of our kids are bused off the Blood Reserve to the surrounding communities to attend school. So there's a great deal of interaction, and we just want to try and do our part to ensure that there's more positive chances than there are for negative interaction.
Yeah, no, it's such a fabulous idea, and I just look forward to seeing these new signs going up. And I believe the project is inviting communities, businesses, institutions to take part. And what they can do is, I believe they can apply. Is it a $2,000 grant that they can receive for the creation of this sign, right?
With the stipulation, they throw in 500. So we're offering them 80% funding for the sign. Yeah. So I should mention also, Jeanette, that I explained to the committee that I'm working, to the signage committee, that there are names for some of the older communities in southern Alberta, but it's not always a direct translation. There's something that strikes our elders that's peculiar about this, and that sometimes they go with that. I'll give you an example, Tabor.
Okay.
Because Tabor sounds similar to table.
Okay.
That's actually that our name for Tabor is Itasuyo, which means something we eat on, which was the name we gave. It's not, whereas Fort McLeod, Agapioyus, means many houses. So that's where the fort was established, and then the community started growing. So we refer to it as many houses. So that's been historically the name. Yes, and Lethbridge, Sikoho, Black Rock, for the coal mining history that Lethbridge was the central part of in southern Alberta. So it would be a direct translation or just a similar sounding word in the English language, like Tabor. Right?
I've also been told, Arnold, that you're a wealth of information when it comes to the language, the Blackfoot language, and particularly how some of the language has had to sort of adapt over the years to accommodate more for modern words, almost like, like the technology that we use, like computers, cell phones, because those weren't around, obviously, back when the Blackfoot language was coming to be. I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
So we, at the annual symposium where we gather the reps mainly from Ghana, from Blood, but like I said, the 3 other Blackfoot nations always have reps there. So one session is always devoted, we call it coining new phrases, coining new. So the audience is invited. We always limit it to around 200, 225, and it's always full. We have to turn people away. So we know it's been a very popular symposium over the years. So in opening up that one session, we invite the audience to submit words that they would like translated. And we'd like to make a difference at this point between translation and interpretation. So we offer both. We can interpret word for word, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily work. So sometimes we have to interpret what the speaker is trying to say and then issue our word for it or develop our word for it. So, yeah, so that's been a major part of our work in bringing the community together. And what we want to do is, when we have enough of these new words, publish them in a booklet so people can use them for easy reference. There's been a number of other organizations that have developed apps for the Blackfoot language. So you just go into that and you get the translation for the, well, not the translate, the pronunciation.
Okay.
And the translation or interpretation of. So there's a lot of tools that are available out there for people who are interested to start learning it. So texting at our second last symposium, we said, okay, everybody, even our seniors use texts nowadays, eh? So we said, okay, how do we translate it? And the most accepted one in the symposium seemed to be Steckam Sinakyo, an object or a process where you write fast. So that's how we.
Okay. So it interprets into process where you write fast. Texting. Maybe not for all of us, though. Especially when you get those clumsy thumbsies, you know, and you're like, have to go back. That's not what I meant to say. Arnold, it looks like we're about out of time, but thank you so much for joining me today and having this really fun conversation about, you know, some of the interpretation of Blackfoot language. It's really interesting.
Okay, well, I hope we have a chance as we move further along. I can report how many communities have taken us up on our offer, etc. Yeah.
I would love to hear that. Thanks so much, Arnold. Okay. Arnold Fox is the Director of Blood Tribe Social Services. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.